Hey, it's Drybear. Dragonflight Season 1, Week 4 is coming to a close, so it's time to look at the rankings for each class. We've already done the DPS rankings. Today we're going to be talking about the tank rankings in all of the PvE styles of content. I'll put the healer rankings and the DPS rankings down below in the description because I'll do all three. And then today we're just going to talk about the tanks, the beefy boys. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. All right, let's dive into the tank ranking. So a bit of a disclaimer here, the same thing for healers and for tanks. In general, ranking DPS is a very straightforward process because the role and the power of DPS is, can you kill stuff? And that's a very easily represented number because you can look at outward DPS for those classes and rank them together. When you look at roles for tank and for healer, and in this case tank, it's not as cut and dry, right? Because the role for a tank is, we need you to take the aggro of the monster or the boss, and we need you to not die, and we need you to do as much damage as you can. But those categories are a little bit looser. It's not so much how much damage can you deal, it's just don't die. So we can look at things like healing, self-healing for tanks, although some tanks are more damage reduction rather than self-healing. We can look at things like damage output, though some tanks are super tanky, but do less damage than others. And in some cases, in raid, the damage can matter a little less, depending on the character. So there's not a really easy metric for measuring tanks. There never has been, and I have yet to see one that is a surefire smoking gun of this is how you rank tanks. So I've taken a shot at this. This is basically looking at the highest possible percentile parses for all tanks. And the theory here is, in the best scenario, at the highest level, with the best players playing their best, how are the tanks performing and which tanks are being brought into the hard content with the highest possible parses. And that's what we have here. Now, Mythic Plus is straightforward. Mythic Plus is just going to be completion. All classes, regardless of role, are scored the same. So the Mythic Plus will be accurate. But for Heroic Raid and for Mythic Raid, this is just going to be an estimation. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. So just like I did with my DPS, I put them into three categories: Heroic, Mythic Raid, and Mythic Plus. On the left side of the screen, you will see their scores sorted based on those categories. And on the right side of the screen, we have stacked all of those scores together to see how the tanks stack up against each other when you look at the three styles of content. And the theory here is that Heroic Raid difficulty isn't really a thing. It's really just, you let your kids out in the backyard and they run around and do whatever they want. And there's not really any rules or restrictions because Heroic Raid doesn't require you to fit in a specific box as much as the higher difficulty would. So in that case, it shows you what classes, when left to their own devices, perform better than others. When you go to Mythic Raid, the difficulty restricts classes significantly more. Some classes that may be able to get by in lower difficulties struggle a lot more in Mythic Raid, and the classes that are higher skill ceiling with better output tend to do better in Mythic Raid, and then Mythic Plus is the same. So what we have here, we'll look at the three categories, and we'll look at the overall. What's interesting here is across the board, Protection Warrior, Blood DK, and Vengeance Demon Hunter are pretty close together in most scenarios. What's interesting is in Heroic Raid, when you're looking at people that are performing the best in Heroic Raid, you actually see Protection Warrior pretty low down. This could be because it has it could be due to a higher skill ceiling, that when you're bringing just random people into Heroic Raid, the Protection Warriors are just doing poorly, just because they're not utilizing their full toolkit, that sort of thing. And then you'll see kind of that drop down. But then when you look at actual challenge content, Mythic Raids and Mythic Plus, Protection Warrior is the best. Now, because they do worse in Heroic Raid, and we're using that as a metric, Blood DK and Protection Warrior are almost basically tied. They're within like a tenth of a score next to each other on the total scoring ranking. You can see by the stacked bar separation, the Protection Warrior obviously does much better in Mythic Plus and Mythic Raid. They just do less well compared to Blood DK when it comes to Heroic Raid. The big difference between the two, Blood DK is by far the highest self-healing tank. It's one of the tanks that I have, like, as a healer, oftentimes struggle to heal them emotionally because their health bar just yo-yos so much. They'll drop down to like 10% and then full heal themselves with a crazy death strike. They'll drop down again and full heal themselves. And it's unlike the other tanks that tend to be a little bit more steady. Blood DKs yo-yo a lot, and it stresses me out. But obviously they're very effective. They have decent damage and good performance. But I think in most content, you can look at Blood DK and Protection Warrior as being the best. If difficulty is on the line, you're pushing high keys or you're pushing Mythic Raid, Protection Warrior is hands down the best tank in the game. And that's kind of just where they've been ever since the start of Season 1. So that's kind of like your upper cohort there. Your grouping of data is the Blood DK and the Protection Warrior. And historically, when I looked at this the first week and for the preseason start, it did group Brewmaster, Vengeance DH, and Guardian Druid together in the middle, and Protection Paladin was down at the bottom. Interestingly enough, as gear has been getting better and better at higher difficulties, Protection Paladin has been outperforming Guardian Druid and been showing to be a lot more effective. In fact, if you look at the scoring on the left side, Guardian Druid is significantly lower than all in Mythic Raid, and they do struggle a bit in Mythic Plus as well. They do okay in Heroic Raid when the difficulty is lower, but as that difficulty goes up, Guardian Druid starts to struggle. So you'll see them kind of down there at the bottom with their stack scores all the way there. And that middle grouping that we saw at the start of Season 1 is no longer there. Vengeance, Brewmaster, and Protection Paladin are starting to separate. Vengeance DH has been starting to take the lead, especially in challenge content. You can see for Mythic Raid, Mythic Plus, and Heroic Raid, they're in their third place. So they're holding on to that. And keep in mind that on Tuesday, they are getting a buff. It's not a major buff. They're getting more armor and a little bit more tankiness, which shouldn't have too much of an impact, but it will help them a good bit. So Vengeance DH kind of taking that third slot pretty handily. Then I would say probably the fourth spot should go to Brewmaster. In Mythic Raid, they are fourth. They are the lowest in Mythic Plus, just almost tied with Guardian Druid and being outperformed by Protection Paladin. But to be fair, Mythic Plus, Protection Paladin brings a battle res, some extra bop, some bubbles, things like that, which can be super useful, and some external healing, which can help healers get through really tough healing windows, especially on Tyrannical, where everyone's taking a bunch of damage. Protection Paladin can be throwing out Word of Glories to keep people topped, whereas Brewmaster is really just focused on themselves. But they are taking the fourth spot in Mythic Raid. Then the bottom two, Protection Paladin and Guardian. And it looks like overall Protection Paladin is just behind Brewmaster, but noticeably above Guardian Druid. So Guardian Druid still sitting at the bottom, kind of struggling there. They have some nice heals. They have some great options. Their kit is a little bit simpler than some of the others, but not so much so that they don't have the options that every tank would have. After the Wildfire is really nice. It's a great tool for Mythic Plus and some scenarios in small groups because you get a nice big heal if you plan it out. They, and when you look at Prop Paladin and Guardian Druid, they probably, if you want to play them, I've been watching some high keys of Guardian Druids, and a lot of them end up kiting because they just can't take the hits as well as the other tank. So I would hope to see some nice buffs and some nice love coming out for Guardian Druids, as it seems like they could just use some extra meat on their bones just to be a little bit tankier, a little bit more survivable, and Protection Paladin probably in the same boat. Brewmaster, I'm not sure if they need changes. I feel like they're about where you'd expect them to be. Brewmasters tend to scale really well. Like Brewmasters and Vengeance DHs scale incredibly well with gear because a lot of their tankiness comes from their passive stats and how those stats interact with each other, rather than the active mitigations or self-healing that the other tanks rely on. So the better Brewmasters get in gear, the better they perform, the better they handle stagger, the better they're able to kind of get good Celestial Brews. And Brewmasters also getting a nice buff. 15 seconds off their Celestial Brew is going to be pretty big as well. So a big chunk there. I would say that the ones that really stand out are Guardian Druid and Protection Paladin, just kind of sitting at the bottom. But let me know what you think. These are the tank rankings for week 4. We're going into week 5. It is a fortified week next week. And of course, the raids reset again. So good luck with your vaults. Let me know what surprised you about these. If this is what you experienced in your groups and your raids overall, or if there's something different that you're experiencing. And if you play any of these, let me know down in the comments so you can either, cheers with the other tanks that are doing the best, or you can commiserate with the other tanks that are your class and maybe not doing as well. So that's it for me. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments from me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi.
If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.